The laughter died mid-sentence when Jimmy Fallon saw her face. An elderly woman in the third row was crying, clutching a worn envelope against her chest. The Tonight Show had suddenly become something else entirely. It started as Tuesday's regular taping at 30 Rock. The Roots were warming up the crowd with their signature energy. Jimmy bounded onto the stage in his navy suit, ready for another night of comedy and celebrity interviews. But during the monologue, something caught his eye. While the audience roared at his Trump impression, one woman sat motionless. Her tears reflected the stage lights like tiny diamonds of grief. Jimmy's comedian instincts kicked in first. He walked toward her section with his trademark grin. "Hey, are we being too funny down here?" The woman shook her head and stood up slowly. Her voice trembled as it cut through the studio noise. "Jimmy, I have something my father wrote for you." The studio fell silent instantly. 300 people held their breath as Jimmy's smile faded. He realized this wasn't a bit or a planted moment. "What's your name?" Jimmy asked, his voice softer now. The woman wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Margaret. Margaret Shin. And this letter, my dad finished it 3 days before he died." Jimmy felt the weight of the moment settling over the studio. He looked at his producers, then back at Margaret. Without hesitation, he made a decision that would change everything. "Margaret, would you come up here?" Jimmy asked gently. The audience began applauding, but it was different now. These weren't entertainment claps, but sounds of support and love. Margaret walked slowly down the aisle, still clutching the envelope. She climbed the steps to Jimmy's desk area. Her hands shook as she extended the letter toward him. "He watched your show every night," Margaret whispered. "Even when the cancer made him so weak, he never missed it. He said you felt like family." Jimmy took the envelope with reverence. The paper was cream-colored and slightly yellowed at the edges. "Margaret, are you sure you want me to read this here?" "He wrote it specifically for you to read," she replied. "On television, in front of everyone. That was his wish." Jimmy's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the letter. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate, the words of a man who knew his time was ending. He began to read silently first. The camera caught every micro-expression crossing Jimmy's face. His eyebrows raised, then furrowed deeply. His jaw tightened as he reached the middle of the page. "Oh my God," Jimmy whispered, looking up at Margaret. His eyes were already glistening with unshed tears. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Margaret nodded firmly through her own tears. "He wanted the world to hear it, especially from you." Jimmy cleared his throat and looked directly into the camera. His voice was steady but thick with emotion. "This is from Margaret's father, Dr. William Chen." "Dear Jimmy," he began, his voice growing stronger. "If my daughter is reading this to you, it means I kept my promise. I told her I'd finish this letter before I left." The studio was completely silent, except for Jimmy's voice. Even the Roots had stopped their usual between-segment chatter. Every person in that room understood they were witnessing something sacred. "I've been watching your show for 8 years," Jimmy continued reading. "Through chemo treatments, sleepless nights, and days when hope felt impossible. You never knew, but you were my companion through the hardest journey of my life." Jimmy's voice cracked slightly on the word companion. He paused, took a breath, and continued. Margaret stood beside him, tears flowing freely, but with a proud smile. "When the doctors told me I had 3 months left, I didn't know how to tell Margaret. She's my only family since her mother passed. I sat in my hospital room that night, watching your monologue, and you made me laugh." The camera panned to audience members wiping their eyes. In the control room, producers who had worked in television for decades found themselves reaching for tissues. This wasn't manufactured emotion. "That's when I realized something," Jimmy read on. "Laughter doesn't cure cancer, but it reminds us we're still alive. You gave me dozens of nights where I forgot about dying and remembered what living felt like." Jimmy stopped reading and looked at Margaret. "Your father sounds like an incredible man," he said softly. She nodded, unable to speak. "There's more," Jimmy said, returning to the letter. "Jimmy, I need you to do something for me. Margaret is going to feel lost without me. She took care of me for 2 years, putting her own life on hold. The weight of responsibility settled on Jimmy's shoulders. He glanced at Margaret, who was listening to her father's words as if hearing them for the first time. In a way, she was. She loves to paint, but she stopped to take care of me. She dreams of opening a small art studio, but she thinks it's too late to start over at 57. Would you tell her something for me? Jimmy's hands were visibly shaking now. He looked at Margaret, then back at the letter. The studio waited in absolute silence. Would you tell her that it's never too late to paint your dreams into reality? That every sunset she captures on canvas is a piece of joy she's giving to the world? That I'll be watching her create beautiful things long after my hands can't hold a brush? Tears were flowing down Jimmy's cheeks now. He didn't try to hide them or wipe them away. Margaret reached over and gently touched his arm. "There's one more thing," Jimmy whispered, his voice barely audible. "If you're reading this on television, Margaret, it means you found the courage to share our story. I'm so proud of you." The final paragraph broke him completely. "Jimmy, thank you for being the son I never had, the friend I always needed, and the light that kept shining when everything else went dark. Take care of my girl. She's the most beautiful painting I ever helped create." Jimmy set the letter down gently on his desk. For a long moment, nobody moved or spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was holy. Then Jimmy did something unprecedented in late-night television history. He walked around his desk and pulled Margaret into a hug. Not a quick, camera-friendly embrace, but the kind of hug a son gives his mother. "Your dad is still here," Jimmy whispered into her ear, but the microphone caught it. "He's in every word of this letter, in every painting you'll create, in every sunset you'll see." The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. But it wasn't celebratory clapping. It was the sound of 300 hearts breaking and healing simultaneously. The Roots began playing a soft, instrumental version of "What a Wonderful World." Jimmy pulled back and looked at Margaret with tear-stained cheeks. "Your father asked me to take care of you, and I take that seriously. Do you still want to paint?" Margaret nodded, crying and laughing at the same time. "I haven't touched a brush in 3 years," she admitted. "I don't even know if I remember how." "Well," Jimmy said, wiping his eyes, "I happen to know some people who might be able to help with that." He turned to his producers in the wings and nodded. Within minutes, the crew had wheeled out an easel, paints, and canvases. "What do you say we give your dad that art studio he dreamed about? Right here, right now." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth in shock. The audience cheered as Jimmy helped her to the easel. "What should we paint first?" "A sunrise," Margaret said without hesitation. "Dad always said sunrises were God's way of reminding us that every day is a new beginning." As Margaret began to paint, Jimmy sat quietly beside her. The cameras captured every brushstroke, but more importantly, they captured the healing happening in real time. The Tonight Show had become a place where grief transformed into art. The painting that emerged was simple but beautiful. Golden light breaking through purple clouds, promising hope after the darkest night. When Margaret finished, the studio erupted again. Jimmy stood up and addressed the camera directly. "Dr. William Chen, wherever you are, your daughter just painted her first sunrise without you. And somehow, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The show that aired 3 weeks later became the most watched Tonight Show episode in 5 years. But more importantly, it sparked something bigger than television ratings. Margaret opened Sunrise Studios, 6 months later, teaching art therapy to people dealing with loss. The first painting on the wall was the sunrise she'd created that night, with her father's letter framed beside it. Jimmy never spoke publicly about the exact moment he decided to read that letter on television. But he did say this in an interview months later. "Some nights, you're just the host. But that night, I got to be exactly what Dr. Chen asked me to be." The letter itself was eventually donated to the Museum of Television and Radio, but its real legacy lives in every person who watched that episode and decided to pursue a dream they thought they'd lost. Because sometimes, The most powerful moments on television happen when someone reminds us that love doesn't end with death. It transforms into art, into laughter, into the courage to paint new sunrises even after the longest nights.